Hi there, this is Robert, owner of 8 businesses generating 7 figures yearly. In this episode of the Business Growth Architect Show, we will discuss how to make decisions based on data and how to align those decisions with your values in a way that you will never regret any decision that you have made, at least by your own standards. I look forward to being of service with you in this episode and talk to you later.
Welcome to the Business Growth Architect Show. I am Beate Gillette. I am the host. I want to welcome you to our globally top 10% ranked podcast, where you will hear from industry experts about the strategies that are working right now to unlock hidden opportunities in any market so that you can grow your authority and scale your impact. And now let's get started with the show. Hello and welcome back. This is your host, Beate Gillette, and I'm here today with Robert Indries. And we're going to talk about something today that I think is very difficult for a lot of people to come to terms with, and that is decisiveness. And what are the decisions that you should be making in an environment like this? Should you wait? Should you take advantage of the market? What are the opportunities? How do I become successful when so much is up in the air? Robert, I am excited to talk to you about this. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Robert, tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do so our audience gets to know you.
I was born in a developing country, in a, let's say, modest household. I remember we didn't really have any money for anything up until I went to high school and I started working jobs myself. And then, I could pay for things that I wanted. And I very quickly became interested in technology because I read a book on the evolution of technology and it just got me hooked immediately. And so this was when I was like 10 years old. Since then, always wanted to be an engineer, did my bachelor's in engineering, did my master's in engineering, just loved everything about it. So far, to this date, we have completed over 200 engineering projects in one of my companies. Everything from autonomous flying drones to dermatology sensors to anything you could think of, we've probably built until now. So very exciting there. And then I realized at one point that I can use my engineer brain to engineer systems in businesses and just to make them scale and work typically much better than most, because I realized, and this is something you read about or listen to nowadays as well, if you spend, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred hours learning something, becoming good at something, but just a couple hundred hours. We're not talking about 10,000 hours or whatever. Just a couple hundred hours, you're typically better than 95% of anyone in that topic. You're literally in the top 5% after just a couple hundred hours invested. So I was literally investing in learning how to build businesses. And I just did it over and over and over again. And I realized it's not as difficult as people make it sound. And I realized that one of the main reasons why people find it so difficult is because they lack decisiveness. They're like, what if, what if I do this and this happens? What if I don't do anything? And then, what happens then? And so on and so forth. Why not wait? Or whatever, things of that nature. And so what I realized is something that I have that is a prerequisite for success in entrepreneurship. Because again, you can be successful in anything you want. But specifically in entrepreneurship, something I noticed is that you need to be willing to, number one, calculate the odds, put in the effort to calculate your odds of success, of luck, many times and so on. How can you get the odds in your favor? And number two, be willing to take risks because no one else on your team will do it for you. You have to be willing to do that. Even if people on your team are willing to take risks, they will always be, let's say, blocked by your level of knowledge, of competence, of risk taking, and so on and so forth. Like they won't be able to surpass you, only maybe replace you if they buy the business from you, which sometimes happens. I have some friends that own businesses because they bought it from the people they were working for, and so those type of stories happen, but they're very rare. So otherwise, you need to be very mindful as a leader that you need to be one of the most decisive people in the room at almost all the time. And so,
I think this is a really great conversation for us to have. So decisiveness, right?
Mhm.
Why do you think people have such a difficult time to make a decision? Is it fear of failure? Is it that they are afraid of being found out? Is it what are all the things that go into why can people not make a decision?
Typically, it's. I mean, I've had the privilege of having over 1,000 coaching calls so far. So, if you boil it down to the absolute basic issue, it's a fear of not being loved. And I can go very esoteric on this, but basically, that's the lowest, most fundamental issue. Is that if I fail, I will disappoint my family. If I fail, I will disappoint my colleagues. If I fail, I'll disappoint the community. If I fail, I'll disappoint myself or whatever. But basically, I will not feel worthy of love. That's what it boils down to almost every single time. Like 99% of cases, and I'm not exaggerating, people feel that their worth, like they are loved because of who they are. And if they lose that, like let's say I have a company of 10 employees and it's making me 1 million a year, if I risk something and I lose that, will my wife love me? Will my children love me when I can't do everything for them? Will and so on and so forth. It's just all of this fights against you. And so I believe that fear is a very good tool that we can use. And I believe it is incredibly underrated because everyone talks about being courageous, and letting go of fear and doing it anyway, and so on and so forth. But I believe that is to a great extent, especially to people that aren't data driven, that's a recipe for disaster. Because if you fear failing in something that you don't have information on, there are high chances that you will fail in that. So, data driven decisiveness is what we're talking about here today, not decisiveness for the purpose of just moving on with something, because that typically leads to superficiality, right? Just doing things so that you're busy all the time, right? You're busy being busy, and we know how that is. If all of us have been there at one point or another. And so what I believe is humans are where they are as a species, as an animal species, because we have one thing that all the other animals do not have, which is foresight. We are able to see the future. No other animal can do this. The other animals do things instinctually. They migrate instinctually. They hibernate instinctually. They do whatever they do. It's not like a strategic plan in their brains. They just do it because they know they need to. Like they feel the drive to do those things. People, on the other hand, say, okay, I will have 3 months where my crops will not grow. I typically eat this much a day, so I need to have this much food available for the next 3 months where I won't have crops, right? Or whatever it is. Like people can actually plan. So within those plans, there are the good things that can happen, and there are the bad things that can happen in the plan. Okay, well, nowadays we don't have lions anymore, right? At no point in time has anyone that's listening to this podcast had to flee for their life from a lion, statistically speaking, right? Or from an alligator or whatever else, right? We're all safe, but we still have the fear, let's say, part of our brain that says I should be fearful of something. So the only something you can be fearful of nowadays, in 90% of cases, is your imagination, right? Like, what can you imagine? So, most people that are fearful or miserable or otherwise unhappy or scared, is it because they're not living in the present? The past is memory, the future is fiction. Anyone that's sad or suffering or scared is either suffering the past, a memory, or suffering the future. You cannot suffer in the present moment. Only if you literally had an accident and whatever, you're in literal physical pain. Otherwise, you and I sitting here, or anyone listening to this podcast, at home from the comfort of their home, they don't have any real suffering, right? In most cases, again, we're talking about data here, right? 90 something percent. 90 something percent of people that are fearful, they're fearing their imagination, something that has not happened. So now, if we use that as a tool, if we think for a second, okay, we've been blessed with this brain that can see the future. Again, no one else can do this. This is why we are the species that we are. We can literally see the future and say, If I don't send this proposal, they might think I'm not serious, for example, right? If I don't send this tomorrow, they might think that, I'm not fast enough, I'm not whatever. Okay, so that's a fear. So you have that fear, it might be warranted from previous experience, right? Because in the past, when you weren't fast in delivering, another vendor took the spot because they were very fast in sending over a proposal. And because you took your precious time, you lost that deal. So it's data telling you that this is an option, this is a negative outcome that can occur. And so to use that data point, you can say, okay, so if I send this tomorrow, then my chances might be higher of gaining this deal. If you're younger, if you have exams, or you go to school, university or MBA or whatever. So I even know people in their 60s still doing MBAs. But basically, if you have an exam, right, in a few weeks, your brain tells you, I might fail that exam. Okay, well, what's the obvious and very logical, let's say, mature thing to do? Let me see what will be included in that exam. And so let me learn it. Let me study it. Let me practice it with someone. Let me do whatever I need to do to be prepared. And so I take that fear and I take it into productivity. And so as long as you do this, you will see that your level of anxiety and fear will go down, like plummet, like there's no tomorrow. Because you realize that everything that's a fear impulse in your brain is actually your brain warning you of a potential negative outcome that you can be prepared for. And so all of a sudden, you're grateful. Whenever a fear impulse goes into your brain, you say, thank you so much for being with me. Thank you so much for
You're doing
showing
such a
me
good
this.
job to warn me.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you for the fear. So now I can
Yeah.
use that and be prepared.
So it sounds almost to me, Robert, as if this has a lot of the elements that we here at the Growth Architect teach people when it comes to pitching. So when I just listen to you, it almost sounds to me like you look at the decision making from the perspective of the detaching the emotional part of it, right? To put a logical or a data driven point behind the emotion and say, is this true? What do I know about this? Well, what does the data tell me? The data tells me that people who make decisions in business tend to be more successful. People who are okay with making mistakes tend to be more successful. Well, why is that? Because they're eliminating the pathways to things that they could waste a lot of time on much quicker, and they know that's not the way to go. So, where do you get the data from, or how do you? Is there like some sort of secret Jedi trick that when I'm in this moment and now I go, it is overwhelming. I have decision paralysis. I'm being forced to make this decision. I don't know if it's the right decision to make. Is there like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step thing that you secretly do?
Yeah, I'm not secretly, but there. So number one, anyone that wants to have very large amounts of success in their life should always model the masters. That's what I say, modeling the masters, right? So look at all of the masters out there that have achieved already what you want to achieve, because there are people that have done it. I mean, if you look at, okay, I want to build $1 trillion business. Okay, fine, Apple has already done it, so just look at them, right? They're valued at $1 trillion last year. So if anything you probably want to do has already been done to some extent, so study that and look at how they've done it. That might not be the way you want to do it. However, do not think for a second that if you don't do it exactly the way they've done it, that you can be successful. There's always a 50-50 chance. Doing it your way might be as successful or more successful, or it can be less successful, right? So don't think that if you don't do it exactly their way, you can get the same result. Even more so, doing it exactly their way might not get you the same result because they're already in the market. So they have a natural advantage to you because you're starting, whatever, 5-10 years later, which might also be an advantage because they have, legacy procedures and so on and so forth. You come in, build everything with AI from the beginning, right? So you can have certain advantages to using new tech, new systems, and so on. So now, when we talk about modeling the masters, my background is very, very similar to that of Bill Gates. Both engineers, both started working on engineering projects when we were like 11, and so on and so forth. So I'm very similar to him. Certain things about what he's done I don't agree with because they're not in my values, right? My family is higher in my values than for him. So when you have the self-awareness of who you are and then you look at the master of what they've achieved, then you can make your own plan, your own path in life, basically. So something that Bill Gates does, or used to do for a long time and still does to this day, is think weeks. Every year he has at least one think week when he gives himself one full week, no distractions, just pen, paper, books that he wanted to read, and so on. And basically, during that time, he sets the entire vision for the next year. And it's crazy, but he would do it every single time, right? And so that's incredibly helpful. Now, you don't need to do one think week once a year. If you're running, a business that's growing whatever 1000% year over year, you might not have time for more than 1 week per year like he has. But most of us typically have more time than that. So instead of waiting 51 weeks and then having a think week, every month or every quarter you can have a think week or a few days, just to go somewhere and think. The reason why we do not make good decisions is because we do not give ourselves time to think. And I'm very honest when I say that. We are constantly distracted. Just try, anyone listening to this podcast, I dare you to sit in one room without your phone, without your computer, without anything. Just sit in one room and see how many times, just count on a paper or whatever, how many times you get the impulse to check your
Grab the
phone,
phone, yeah.
to do something, right? So that's the number of times you distract yourself. And we already know that the mind needs like 15 to 20 minutes to start focusing on an activity, like to enter flow state. So if you check your phone every 5 to 10 minutes, you never go into flow state, right? And so when you don't give yourself enough time to think, and I give myself sometimes hours, half a day, a full day, or whatever, I literally have some days when I have meetings until 12 and then nothing for the rest of the day. And then the rest of the day, what I do is I think. I'm like, okay, what do we do now? We have these 5 things we need to take a decision on. Let me do some due diligence. Let me do some research. What are the competitors doing? What does my staff say about this, right? What does our historical data say about this? And so on and so forth. So the moment you give yourself time and then you have a methodology which is quite simple. I mean, it's banal if you think about it. Pros and cons weighted against one another. Because, for example, if I take a decision, a very simple decision, should I work 2 hours extra per day or should I spend that time with family? So, in my value system, let's say working 2 extra hours for me would be a 7, let's say, in terms of weighted value in my life. Spending 2 hours with my wife is a 10. So for me, that one decision is very easy, right? Should I spend 2 extra hours working, or should I spend 2 extra hours, surprising my wife, going on a walk, making love, whatever it is that we want to do during those 2 hours? We now have time to do that, right? Because I say, okay, I'm not going to work as much as Bill Gates, because even though I want his level of success, I define success differently, right? And so for me, maybe I won't have $115 billion in net worth. I'm okay even if I have $1 billion in net worth, which is, by the way,
Yeah.
115 times less than him. And so if I have 115x less, right, which is 10,000% less wealth, but I spend so much more time with my family, guess what? I'll still have more than enough money than I could ever spend, in normal things. And I've lived my life based on my values.
I love that. And we will be right back after this quick message. Are you looking for the hidden opportunities for you in this market? Or are you simply wanting to figure out what is your unique differentiation factor that makes clients want to work with you and not your competitors? If this resonates, I want to invite you to go to uncoverysession.com and schedule your 15-minute complimentary uncovery session with one of our business growth advisors that will take you through what your number one business growth blocker is, what you can do to remove it, and what your very best next step should be. And now let's get back to the show. Beate Gillette here with Robert Indries, and we're talking about decision making, mindset, and a value system. So, Robert, you just said something really interesting. You said that you adjust your value system based up on giving yourself the time to actually come to the conclusion of what it is that you want. If I understand this right, and I want to rephrase this so that our audience really understands the process. Because what happens in my experience with people and decision making is the decision is due. You postpone it until it becomes this huge thing, much bigger than it needs to be, because you said you either live in the future or in the past, which both of these, one hasn't happened yet, the other one is completely irrelevant to this experience. So you psych yourself out until you feel yourself completely pushed in the corner. The last minute you make this decision, which then is probably the worst decision you can make, because then you have all the pressure on your shoulders. You say, stop it, give yourself time, get ahead of this, model yourself after somebody who's achieved what you want to achieve, evaluate if this level of success is the actual level of success that you want to achieve in your example with Bill Gates. So you said you're okay with what, 115 times less than him? Some crazy number like that, because your value system is important. So here is now the trick question that comes to mind, and myself included. I think this is one of the biggest things to overcome in life. We have this notion that we need to do more, that working harder means a better outcome, that being more involved means a better outcome, more hours mean more outcome, hustling means a better outcome, putting everything in, risking everything, jeopardizing your health, your family. All of these are payoffs that you have to do to get to the point of success. Is that true?
I'm going to say something that might seem odd to people listening. However, if you want Elon Musk slash Jeff Bezos slash Bill Gates level of success, then the answer is purely yes. More hours, more dedication, ignoring everything else in life, and so on and so forth. It's called a monomaniacal focus. You can Google it. It's a monomaniacal focus on one thing, right? Bill Gates said one computer on the desk of every human being on the planet. Guess what? They achieved it, and it made him a 100 whatever billionaire, right? Elon Musk, everything, accelerating the adoption of sustainable energy. He's doing it with Tesla, getting people to be a multi-planetary species. He's doing that with SpaceX, and so on and so forth, right? The guy doesn't do anything else than that. He only does this. So if you want to be the next $250 billion business mogul, then yes, more hours, less sleep, working every day of the week, 7 days a week, sleeping at your office, working at your office, ignoring your health or your family, whatever. Yes to all of the above. If you want that, and just accept that you want that, and you don't care about family. Don't even get married, please. don't get a wife and then make her
Save
miserable.
yourself the divorce. Yes.
Exactly. Don't even get married. Don't make children. For the love of God, just don't do any of that. Just have fun. I'm
Yeah.
sure there are many women out there that would love to just have fun and then not have anything tied to it.
Yeah.
So, or men, if you're a woman. So basically, decide what you want. What's your value system? So if you want to be that guy or that woman, right, then do that. Just more hours, wake up at 4 a.m., work until 10 p.m., go to bed, sleep 6 hours, do it again the next day, right? Again, if that's your goal. Now, to come back from that extreme, because again, these are the wealthiest people on the planet. Out of 8 billion people, these are the top 100. Like, you can't imagine how rare that is, because everyone talks about them like there is something common, but it's the rarest of rare, right? If there's a rare human being, then these people are rarer than that, right?
Yeah. They're
Because it
not
doesn't
even the
happen.
1%ers, they're the 0.1 percenters.
No, not it's point 0.0001
Oh,
percent, right?
sorry, I was off by a
Because
few
it's
zeros there.
billions,
Yeah.
right? It's 8 billion people, and
Yeah.
then there's, I don't know how many, maybe 800 people that are billionaires out of 8 billion, right?
Yeah, I call this the genius path. I never heard the word that you were saying earlier before. That the what's it? The monofocus.
Monomaniacal focus.
Monomaniacal focus.
Yeah.
So I've always referred to this as the genius
Yeah.
path because you can't be a genius without the sacrifice in literally
Exactly.
every other area of your life.
Exactly. How many Picassos are there? How many Da Vinci's are there? Right? How many Rockefellers? How many Edisons? How many whatever? Right? How many of those are there? There are very, very few. They sacrificed everything. And there's an amazing quote. It's like a story. It happened in Germany. There was this violin player, the small little thing that sounds amazing. So you have that little violin, and so there are people that play it amazingly well. And there's this guy that was world best on the violin. So they have the play, and then there was this family that was in the VIP section, and in the VIP section you get to meet the people that were in the orchestra, right? And so the guy meets this person after, and other people were there. Obviously, it was like a group meeting, and I can't remember his name, but let's call him Frank. And he said, "Frank, I swear I would give my life to play the violin as well as you." And Frank said, I have given my life to play the violin as well as I do. I've done nothing else but play the violin, right? And so if you want to be the top 0.01%, like the literally best in your industry, in your business, in whatever, yes, nothing else can matter for you, just that one thing. Okay. Now, if I look at how I define success, my yearly costs are under six figures. I kid you not. It's like under 100 grand that I spend on everything that I have, expenditures and so on. And I live a good life. So I spend under 100 grand. So that means that if I have $10 million, right, that means I can live for, what is that? I believe like 1 million is 10, 100 months. That's like 8 years or something like that. So if with $10 million, I can live 8 years if I do not put it in a secure deposit or a secure fund that gives me 8% a year. But if I do, guess what? If I have 10 million, I put it in 8% a year, I make 800 grand out of that. So I spend 100 in a year and I make 800 that same year. Imagine that for a second. You never go out of money. You always have more money in a year than you have the year previous because you're always out. The passive income is always higher than your expenses. So based on that, I don't need hundreds of millions of dollars, right? If I have millions or tens of millions, I am in a place where I can live for the rest of my life without having to work a single day extra. And so in my worldview, sorry, that is financial success. I don't need more than that. I don't need more than how much I want to live and do everything I want in life. So now if that changes for me, if my definition of that changes in 10 years, guess what? In 10 years, I can make more money. And then I can make more money and more money and more money and so on, right? And so I can just keep doing that. Whenever my definition changes, I can do that. So now I know that I can achieve that without monomaniacal focus. I know I can achieve that with less time per day than Bill Gates or Elon Musk and so on and so forth. And I know this factually. I became a millionaire by the time I was 25, and I made 10 million by the time I was 31. So I know already that it's doable, right? I became a decamillionaire in my early 30s. So I know I don't need to do more. I know I can, with the amount I'm doing, I know I'll pass 100 million in the next 10 years or whatever, based on historical data, historical growth data, right? And so if I pass 100 million in the next, even if it takes me 20 years, I'll be 50 and I have made $100 million, right? And again, I never need to work again. And if I have 100 million in 2040, right, that means that I will literally live 150 years or 200 years or something crazy like that,
And you
because
don't
they're
have to
all
worry.
exactly. And so I can live another 100 years of healthy living, right? From that. And guess what? I spend time with my wife. I'm very happy as a person. I'm very fulfilled. I have a six pack for like 15 years now, right? Have no problem with that. I have spent time with my family, with my mother, with my brothers and sisters and so on, with my children, and did everything else I wanted to do. So in my case, I sacrificed nothing. And this might sound weird to some people because in their mind, not going to beers with their friends on a Friday is a sacrifice. For me, it's not. For me, I'd rather spend that night cuddling with my wife because that's what I want to do. I don't want to go out to beers with my friends. I haven't had a beer and I don't even know how long. I don't mind going out with my friends, but at the same time, it can be once a month or once a quarter, right? For me, again, this is how I define it. Some people have their own definition. So once you give yourself time to think and say, okay, what's actually important for me? What do I actually want in life? Then you start defining it. Then you live life by that design for like half a year or a year, and then you adjust because people take themselves too seriously. They say, okay, what's my mission in life? I swear, like people ask us, like, what's my mission in life? What should I do with my life? Right? God-given divine purpose, whatever it is, however they define it. And I tell them, look at every single highly successful person on the planet, and you will find that every single one of them pivoted. All of them, without exception. They've had a mission for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, however much, and then they pivoted, they done something else. Every single person that's successful, because the values you have when you're 20 are not the same values at 30, not at 40, not at 50.
Yeah,
So
I think
adapt.
this is a really critical point you're making, um, because this is also part that goes into the failure, the perception of failure. You are permitted to change your mind, and you're permitted to say, my values have changed. And if you have small children and then suddenly you want to spend more time with your kids and tuck them in at night and play with them on the weekends and you don't want to travel anymore, that's okay. So what I'm really taking away from this conversation with you, Robert, is a very grounding idea that you got to get clear what it is that you want, and then you have to make that decision. And that decision has consequences on whether I want a Bill Gates life and I want to be in that genius route. Then you have to be willing to do what it takes to be that. And if you're not, then you want to find a way that gets modeled after somebody who's already done it. So now, if somebody wants to model their success after you, Robert, where will we send them? How can they find out more about you?
If they just Google my full name, Robert Indries, they should find as much information about me as they wish. I do have a website, robertindries.com. And so if anyone wants to speak with me directly, I do have we talked about this on our last call, a team of assistants helping me, for full-time assistants. However, if you email me at robertindries.com and you mention the name of the podcast, and so on, then I promise I will get back to you personally.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. I love that, because I think that 15 minutes with you could be a real powerful game changer for everybody. Robert, this has been really great. I enjoyed having you on the show so much. And I'm sure we're going to have to do this again sometime.
I look forward to it.
All right. And that's it for us today. Thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of the Business Growth Architect Show. And until next time, and goodbye. Thank you for listening to or watching the show. We are so excited that you're here, and we are very grateful for you. Now it's our turn to ask you for help. Please do share this episode with one other person that needs to hear what we were talking about today. If there's any question you have about business, please do reach out to us and let us know. And don't forget to schedule your complimentary Uncovery session at uncoverysession.com, where one of our business growth advisors will help you to figure out what your number one business growth blocker is in only 15 minutes. And that's it for us today. Until next time.